Take me out to the ball game.
What are you doing?
Did you know DirecTV has the most MLB games?
So, you're singing.
Yeah, they put your favorite teams front and center right when you turn it on. Buy me some cold cuts and flapjacks.
Those aren't even the words.
I'm allergic to peanuts.
Stream DirecTV, home of the most MLB games. Visit DirecTV.com. Claim based on total games offered on national and regional sports networks. RSNs available with choice package or higher. Availability of RSNs varies by zip code and package.
Welcome to Putback here on SNY.TV. I'm Ian Begley, SNY's NBA insider, host of the show, and we're going to break things down with the Knicks and the NBA over the next half hour or so. I got two great guests with me. Senior NBA insider for HoopsHype, Michael Scotto. If you want to know about transactions, you want to know what may be coming or why something's happened, be sure to follow Michael. I'm sure you know his work already. Anthony Donahue. Again, somebody you probably know because he's been on Knicks Twitter for a long time. He might have started Knicks Twitter. He definitely started the Knicks fan media content creator movement, I believe. So I'm sure you know of his work, but also he hosts events with Knicks fans at the Garden and elsewhere throughout the season. He can get you in, have a special experience for you. So be sure to keep an eye on his Twitter at AnthonyMSG for that. And with that, guys, we'll get started as we always do with the baseline. Knicks avoiding their first four-game losing streak of the season by really having a solid end-to-end win over the Kings. Played really well on both sides. It was good three-point shooting, solid defense, ball moving a lot. And I'm just curious, Anthony, for you, when you see what you saw against Sacramento last night, how do you analyze that? What did you see?
I mean, listen, it was a good win last night. Coming off losing 3 games in a row is never a good thing. And losing Jalen Brunson for potentially 3 to 4 weeks, who knows how long he's going to be gone. So to me, it wasn't a win you celebrate, but it was a win that you just had to get. You know, Karl-Anthony Towns played better basketball. The ball moved, and which I suspect without Jalen Brunson, the ball will move a lot more. And hopefully the idea is when Jalen comes back, maybe he has some more trust in his teammates. But the thing is, Jalen's the point guard. So even as great as Jalen is, the ball should always be moving. So hopefully we'll see more ball movement moving forward. But to me, it was just it was an important win. Nothing to celebrate. Just glad a W was in the column.
I got to just say real quick on Jalen Brunson, you know, I think if you've watched him since he's been here, to me, you know, 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 times he's making the right play with the ball when it's in his hands. So I wouldn't say like, you know, he needs to get off of it more, but I do think that, you know, if these guys can find a rhythm with him out, maybe they'll knock shots down once he comes back. But I think the idea that maybe he doesn't get off it enough, I understand it. I'm not a subscriber to it. Michael Scotto, curious for you, as you see this Knicks team come down the stretch, where do you see them in the tiers of the Eastern Conference?
You know, Ian, I think for the Knicks, the biggest thing for them is going to be their depth or lack of it in a sense, because if you're looking at Boston, they still remain the top team in the East when you talk to most executives around the league, even though Cleveland's ahead of them in the standings. Cleveland's probably the deepest team right now on paper in the East, and Kenny Atkinson has them rolling. But for the Knicks, Jalen Brunson obviously has to be back for this team to be a factor in the playoffs. What I was encouraged by watching them play Sacramento was OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges moved the ball extremely well. With Jalen out, I figured Karl Towns would get a lot of action out of the high post. He's a pretty underrated passer, and he had a few nifty behind-the-back passes when he was in traffic in the post last night, and I thought that he's going to garner a lot of attention, and they need Mikal Bridges essentially to be what he was in Brooklyn, more of a scorer to kind of carry the load with Jalen out. But I think right below Boston and Cleveland, you certainly have to look at the Knicks. With Jalen Brunson, they have one of the most clutch players in the league, so they always have a shot. But big picture, when you talk to executives and scouts around the league right now, certainly most people believe that Boston and Cleveland are ahead of them at the moment in the pecking order.
Yeah, the thing you also saw against Sacramento that you haven't seen a lot this year was the Knicks win the battle at the three-point line. They've made a ton of threes. I think it was 21, 22. And they limited Sacramento on the other end to a poor three-point field goal percentage. And they have been worst in the league for much of the year in opponent three-point field goal percentage. So, that's something that I keep an eye on every night. And to see it go right for the Knicks in one of the few instances this year, I'm sure is encouraging for the coaching staff. I'm just curious, Anthony, for you, with Boston and Cleveland and where the Knicks have been, where they are, how do you define a successful season for this group?
Man, that's an awesome question. How do I define a successful season? Well, as of right now, the way it looks, the New York Knicks are most likely going to be the 3 seed, and they are going to play the Pacers, the Pistons, or the Bucks in the first round. So let's say the New York Knicks win a first-round series, and let's assume Boston advances in the first round as well. That means the Knicks will play the Celtics in the second round. And as a fan, that's a series I've been looking forward to now for 3 years. But if you play the Boston Celtics in the second round and you get your doors blown off, 4 games, 5 games, I'm not saying they're good. I'm still a fan. I'll be in Boston for game 1, ready to go. But if you get your doors blown off by the Celtics in round 2, it would be hard to say that's a successful season. You beat Boston, to me, that's borderline my championship. Obviously, the goal is a championship in June, but what is a successful season? I would say, obviously, no matter if we lose in the finals, I'd be devastated. But getting to the conference finals, to me, realistically, would be a successful season for the New York Knicks. 2023 lost in the second round. Hard-fought series to the Heat. 2024 lost to the Pacers. There's no doubt if there wasn't the injuries, the Knicks would have beat the Pacers, but they didn't. So year 3 with, Jalen Brunson and the team being much better, you got to get to the conference finals. But the only problem is to get to the conference finals, the bad guys in green are most likely going to be waiting. And that is going to be tough. And you know what made me really sad, guys? You guys know I bleed orange and blue. My girlfriend is also a Nuggets fan. Don't she likes Joker, not mad at that. So I took her to the Celtics Nuggets game last Sunday in Boston. We had amazing seats and go into the game with no rooting interest, wore regular clothes, chilled. And as a fan, I'm like, oh man, these two teams are just so good. Even though the Knicks beat the Nuggets twice, it just felt like a different level of basketball that I hope the Knicks can get to in the next 2 months.
It's going to be interesting to see if they close the gap at all when they face the Celtics later this regular season. You'll have a couple more chances to see that, at least one more chance.
One more chance at the Garden. So far, 0-3 versus the Celtics. Got to get that win, man. Got to.
And
Definitely
concerning.
that team.
What's that, Michael?
Definitely a little concerning when on paper the Knicks were built to go up against Boston and match up better with them, and they haven't thus far in the regular season at all, quite frankly.
Well, I believe the nickname was Wingstop before the season started.
Yes, it was, and they were not stopping enough. Certainly,
no, defense got to get better, especially on that perimeter.
The one thing that I mean, maybe you guys have noticed it too. OG Anunoby coming back from that foot injury. Maybe it took him a little time to get back in rhythm, but it seems like he is in rhythm. I mean, I think he had 4 steals last night. I believe it was 8 assists. He was great on both ends of the floor, and he's had some big scoring nights for the Knicks recently here, past few games. And to me, this is a great sign for New York. It's a great sign for the defense because him being so active on both ends is just going to help you limit opponents. And one thing that I was looking up, I wanted to see OG and Mitchell Robinson and what that was looking like. I just looked at last night, and I think they were on the floor for 11 minutes together, and they held Sacramento to 95.9 offensive rating, which would be fantastic defense, over the course of a full season. So getting those guys on the floor together, I think it's going to be an interesting look, particularly if Robinson continues to, progress here apace, and maybe he slides into the starting lineup. But OG Anunoby being the OG Anunoby of last season before he got hurt is really important for this team defensively. And since we're talking about the West Coast trip, I also wanted to hit on the Mikal Bridges stuff? Because, Michael, we talked about it earlier. Bridges, to me, has played pretty good the last couple of games. What have you seen from him?
I think for Mikal, in the beginning of the year, it looked like he was trying to find his footing a little bit. Like Josh Hart was the guy who openly came out and said he felt a little lost. But at times I thought it's been more Mikal this year. He's been at his best, even dating back to his days in Brooklyn, offensive. He's coming off curls around the mid-range area. If you can get him in the corner for threes, historically, his percentages have always been better there as a knockdown shooter. You got to get him in his comfort zones to get him rolling. And, at times off the dribble, he'll attack to the mid-range as well. But ideally, great corner spot-up shooter. Who's going to be the guy that gets him the ball off the penetration, though? That's why I touched on Karl-Anthony Towns earlier. And, Ian, just to go back to OG Anunoby for a second, I mean, this guy's been worth every penny, and he's been on the floor for the Knicks, which, knock on wood, for him and the team, has been one of the most critical pieces to their success this season. Obviously, in the past, he's been injury-prone. But you touched on it certainly with OG and Mitchell Robinson, their defensive ratings going up. Tom Thibodeau is going to have a lot of interesting mixing and matching to do because it's one thing to be an elite defensive team, but offensively, it's no doubt they're better with Karl-Anthony Towns at the 5 and kind of going 5 out a little bit when Brunson's healthy. So going to be interesting to see how they mix and match, whether it's Boston, Cleveland, anywhere in the playoffs.
Yeah, and we're talking about the lineups. We're talking about Thibodeau. Knicks, obviously, a few more games left on this road trip. They have Portland and they have Golden State coming up. But since they are out west, we're going to go to a segment called In and Out. We are starting off with PJ Tucker because PJ Tucker is signing a 10-day deal with the Knicks. To me, it would be a little bit surprising if he wasn't here for the rest of the season. I haven't figured out why it's a 10-day, but maybe they're just both sides are being cautious, trying to figure it out. But the idea of Tucker coming in here, to me, is more so locker room, impact on the room, respected voice, veteran, NBA champion. The Knicks have young veterans, but they don't have a veteran with Tucker's experience, and I don't think he's a guy who's afraid to share his opinion about things going on the floor, off the floor. So I think that's where the real benefit is for Tucker. You saw last night he was encouraging Josh Hart to shoot the 3 ball. Hart was shooting the threes and knocked several down. So, yeah, that was interesting to watch. Just night 1 for PJ Tucker. But let's see how that plays itself out. I'm wondering for Anthony, the Tucker signing, you've watched him for his whole career, right? I'm not expecting on the floor with him, but you've been around the Knicks forever. What do you think? What kind of impact do you think a guy like that can have?
So it's rare I say I love what I saw from a player last night when they didn't see the court, but I love what I saw from PJ Tucker last night. I thought he was an excellent, I don't want to say leader. He's only been here for a cup of coffee now. But I loved his energy on the bench. I mean, I wasn't there, but watching on TV, every time you saw him, I loved his energy. It looked like he brought like a little bit of toughness from the bench, obviously. If he's here the rest of the way and here for the playoffs, will he play? Maybe in some situations. But I think you need more of that dog on this roster. The Knicks are pretty tough. They play pretty hard. They play very hard, actually. But they need a little bit more dog. And I think PJ Tucker can hopefully bring that, even if he's not on the court all the time. You need a little bit more anger on this team, not so much laughter and joking all the time. You need a little. You guys feel me on that?
Any winning team has it. Any winning team has it. It sounds like you could have taken that role before PJ did.
Yeah, no, like I said, he didn't play last night, but I actually really loved what I saw. Like he was a little bit like, Rasheed Wallace back in 2012, 2013. Rasheed played a few games, of course, the famous opening night when he banged the 3. But you need that. You need that. Sometimes I feel with this Knicks team, sometimes it's a little too, again, I'm not with them, but sometimes it feels it's not as quote unquote hard and rough as it should be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, a guy who's been here for the whole year, who I think has, his play has fluctuated and maybe is part of the reason why some fans feel the way Anthony does. Mikal Bridges, to me, most recently, you can go out on his offensive inconsistency because he has been shooting the ball well, scoring the ball well over the last couple games. Now, the Knicks need that from him with no Jalen Brunson, but he did it really well, efficiently against the Clippers, efficiently again against the Kings. Obviously, it's got to lead to wins, but I think to me, that's a good sign for Bridges finding some rhythm on the offensive end. Mike, when you look at that trade and you look at the deal since and what may be coming, 5 first-rounders, how do you view that?
Ian, I would say the Knicks were paying the congestion tax before it was the thing in the city.
But isn't that postponed right now, by the way? My Easy Pass has been a little light in the last 2 weeks.
I think it is postponed, but they got
it depends what light you go through in the city, I guess. But traffic cams are on. But Ian, I mean, look, when the Knicks made the trade to acquire Mikal Bridges, I mean, they were looking at other wings too. They did look at Jimmy Butler beforehand, and I think for them, one of the things I would say was Jalen Brunson was a key factor in kind of approving this due to his connection with Mikal from Villanova. You saw towards the end of last year, and I should say, Mikal Bridges joined Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson on their podcast. They've remained close, and the whole Wingstop theory of trying to stop Boston's Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum was a big part of the decision. Now, for Brooklyn to extract all the picks that they did and go into a full rebuild, essentially, was everything that they wanted and more. But for the Knicks, when you make a move like that, you're making a move like that to win a championship ultimately. And I think ultimately the Knicks, I don't know if it's going to be this year. I think more you're looking ahead towards another transaction cycle where they can maybe improve the depth a little bit more, hopefully in the summer. If the Knicks can win a championship, it's going to be worth it. But when you go and push up pretty much all your chips in like that, the only other way is if they didn't win is to potentially down the line in a bigger package, whether you go for Giannis Antetokounmpo or somebody else in the offseason, depending on how Milwaukee does in the playoffs. But that's another conversation for another day.
Right. Mike, has anybody ever told you sound like a young Larry Brown? I'm just hearing you speak with your broadcast voice because we hang out all the time. I'm hearing some Larry Brown.
That's funny. I've heard some more.
A little bit.
Some more Sopranos a little bit, but I'll take it.
Little John Travolta.
Barry would want to do an interview with me then if I sounded like Larry Brown.
Well, Larry Brown had the hard New York City accent, especially when he was the beloved coach of the Knicks for the 05-06 season.
One and done.
Quick though, on Mikal Bridges. He's not the type of guy in the NBA to like call for the rock, demand the ball, go ISO. Tom Thibodeau and the coaching staff, or maybe even Jalen Brunson and some of the players, got to figure out ways to get him the ball. Get him in those curls, get him in that 12-foot spot. That's his office. He's incredible there. Run a couple plays for him. He's not going to take the ball and go ISO. You got to get him the ball, and he's great in that area on the court. You just can't do it twice a game. You got to figure out more ways to get him involved.
That's also PJ Tucker on the bench being a hype man. Every team needs an unk, okay? You need that guy in your ear telling you go get him, you kill him. He got nothing. Like we saw it the other day with Josh Hart. Josh Hart was on fire, and at times he's been a little shy to take three-pointers, but he shot them with confidence last night and looked great. Those are the type of X-factor things that don't show up in a stat sheet that matter. So hopefully a guy like PJ's presence can help push that envelope. Mikal's a team first guy. There are other guys in the NBA, to kind of what Anthony was referencing, more of like that alpha dog type of personality where they're getting theirs no matter what. Mikal's the type of guy that'll fit around the team and whatever you need him to do. And that's fine. But sometimes, kind of to Anthony's point, he needs a little prodding to kind of be more aggressive and go get his.
And because I love him in that 12-foot spot, that little fadeaway he does, off the dribble real quick. Like, you got to get him in that spot more.
And you know what? He actually shot, I think, 6 free throws against the Clippers, which was a season high. He hadn't been getting to the line a lot, but I thought his floor game against the Clippers was very good. So let's see how things continue there for Bridges. Anthony, I'm going to ask you about Deuce, but before I do that, we mentioned it before. I mean, Anthony was early on in terms of the fan media platform, had a radio show, was doing video stuff. So if you were around then, obviously you knew he was the first. Some people might not know it. So I want to give you your credit.
Can I share one of my favorite video stories, by the way? It won't take too long. Can I share it real quick?
Do it.
So 2010 training camp, I was able to go to the training camp at the Knicks practice facility. So I'm there. I've been doing my show for a few years already. I have credibility, but the bottom line is I'm known as a fan, and there was no other like really fan media there. So when they let the media in, you could watch a little bit of the scrimmage, as you know, and then you could interview the players. So I had my digital camera, and I took videos of the players talking. Wilson Chandler, Danilo Gallinari, Amari Stoudemire, and all the other reporters just had their mini displayer or just the old school tape recorder. Yeah. So the interviews happen, and I go back to my laptop in the press room at the Knicks practice facility. Mind you, this is October 2010. And I upload the videos to Facebook because at the time you couldn't put videos on Twitter yet. So I upload Wilson Chandler, Gallinari, Stoudemire, and all the beat writers are furious with me. They're like, these quotes aren't supposed to be available till the next day. I can't believe you're doing this. Like they were like kind of angry. They were kind of angry with me, and I never forgot that.
No, and
now it's like everything's right away. But
I
wasn't like some genius, but I was like, let me put these interviews up right now.
Ahead of your time. You know? And he crossed the barrier. I think a lot of there's some great fan shows. This is not disparaging to anybody, but he originated the style. I think you guys should send him maybe a Father's Day card in June because he really, really broke the mold for you guys and set the tone for what is now just a burgeoning industry, and it's fantastic. I love it. But Anthony planted the flag first, so great job, AD.
Yeah, I was in locker rooms in 2006, 2000. I just really didn't enjoy that part that much. But it was awesome. And I wish looking back, I went to some more practices and stuff. But when I did it was fun. And I remember even like old PR guy, Jonathan Sopranowitz, rolling up on me being like, are you a fan or are you media? And I'm like, I'm both. Like, I'm not going to the practice in my gear. I'm being professional here, but like, I think you can be both depending on what you're doing. Obviously, you guys are at the games covering it, so that's different. But if you're putting out content after the game, stuff like that, I think you can be both as long as you are a professional, of course.
Yeah, you know what? I'm with you on that. Anthony,
young kids being professional is very important.
Yes, amen. See, that's a father's advice. So, Michael, Deuce McBride played really well at Sacramento after not having a great game against the Clippers. Obviously, they need him. They're rolling with him as the starter. To me, McBride been so good off the bench all year, and I don't want to certainly put the cart before the horse at all, but you're talking about maybe in the offseason improving their depth. I'm sure Miles McBride is the last player they'd want to trade here, but you would have to trade a McBride or a Robinson or a player like that, a Chua, to really get something back of substance. So I'm just wondering for you, like, what do you think McBride's value is around the league if he was a part of a package with a bunch of second-round picks? Do you think that could return something of substance?
Yeah, I mean, look, Miles McBride has a ton of value around the league. His contract is team-friendly at this point, given his production. And the thing, though, Ian, is that you have to almost put him in addition to another salary like a Mitchell Robinson if you're going to make an upgrade, because he doesn't make enough money to just get somebody as a standalone one-for-one kind of trade to kind of match salaries, which for the most part around the league you're going to have to do if you're going to make a trade. But you know what, Ian? I always kind of think big picture in my role, and I understand that, Miles McBride has value, and I could see certainly why the Knicks would look at potentially doing something with Mitchell Robinson depending on how the offseason goes. But I always try to think big picture. And when I think of the Knicks, I think of them just getting Karl Towns. You've got Jalen Brunson. Is there a third star out there that will emerge over the summer, depending on how the playoffs go, and a team underperforms, that they really try to push more chips in and go even further all in? They've always consolidated chips the way like They took Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo and helped turn that into Karl Towns. Well, okay. Now, is there another way? Can you do it again? Can you possibly do that? Broaden the horizons a little bit. Can you do that with even eventually maybe Mikal Bridges? You're going to have to figure out if you're going to extend this guy or not as well. In the back of my mind, that's something I'm just keeping tabs on. I'm not reporting anything, but I'm looking ahead thinking, what if a guy like I touched on earlier in your show, Ian, what if a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo becomes available? Well, then at that point, everybody could be available.
Right.
I mean, I like Jalen and Karl Towns, but you get my point. Like, big picture, it always depends on who hits the market. When teams start digging, usually around whether it's the combine, depending on how the playoffs go, or if a little further leading up towards the draft. So Miles McBride has certainly been a great piece for them. I certainly think off the bench, his scoring provides a needed spark. I don't know if I necessarily view him as a floor general, and I don't think you can replace Jalen's leadership and getting everybody set offensively in that regard. But certainly he's been a great fit for them. And on the other hand, Ian, you need guys on team-friendly contracts with this new CBA. The way that the Knicks have managed to duck below the second apron, and I'm sure a lot of credit goes to Brock Aller and some of the other front office guys there for doing that. But just avoiding that line gives them an extra year before looking at certain tax implications and things like that. That is the new gymnastics of the NBA front office now. So equally having a guy like McBride is just as valuable, unless you're going to part with a guy like that to get a real star to really push the chips all in the center of the table.
Right. And Michael, it's interesting because you mentioned Giannis a couple of times, and we all know people in Milwaukee probably hate this. They're probably sick of it. But several teams operated at the trade deadline with the idea of, hey, let's hold our powder here because maybe number 34 becomes available again. I hate to even put that out there because I'm sure Milwaukee fans, it makes them sick, but it's the reality of the league. It's not something that's just kind of out of thin air.
Even look at the Hawks. Look at Trae Young. He's going to be up for a contract extension. And again, this is just stuff that teams are all plotting and planning, looking for months down the line. When I touched on earlier about that next transaction cycle. It's just the nature of the beast. It doesn't necessarily have to be Giannis. It could be Trae Young. It could be any star. The playoffs are going to dictate a lot of potential movement and which teams are desperate, which usually necessitates a trade.
And now, two pigeons who can't believe how good humans have it with DirecTV.
These humans are hopping from streaming apps to live sports without batting a wing.
All from the DirecTV home screen.
With just one click, you could be watching a baseball game, a movie on Netflix,
Or a critically acclaimed documentary.
You watch documentaries?
I love the ones that leave you with a question.
What?
Exactly.
DirecTV, a better way to watch whatever you want to watch. Visit DirecTV.com. Internet-connected Gemini device, separate Netflix membership, and additional paid subscriptions required for third-party apps.
Yeah.
My question is, and of course, if Giannis is available, you probably want to see what you can do. But how many times can you keep retooling with major moves with this roster before building some real continuity moving forward? Look at the Cavs. They have almost their same core from 2 years ago, and they're substantially better now.
Oh, yeah, but the difference is this core right now that you built on paper to go up against the Celtics hasn't fared well against them. Cleveland has been able to duck the tax. So now with the trades they made in getting DeAndre Hunter, moving George Niang, et cetera, so they have a longer window. And you have to look at yourselves objectively and say, is this team good enough? And if it's not, I would
that too.
getting Giannis. Because if you theoretically, whether you had Giannis or someone else, another star, if you felt was worth it, to me, really, Giannis is one of the few guys, then, okay, go fill out the depth and go from there. People are going to want to come at that point. And last but not least, look, you know this, the minutes police have always been after Tom Thibodeau for years. It's not like he's going to a 10-man rotation. So you play to the strength of your coach and you go from there for better or worse. So, again, this is a conversation for down the line. I'm sure the aggregators are going to have fun with this one. But it's the reality of the situation.
Yeah. And I guess we'll see, assuming that the Knicks advance in round one and see how they fare in round 2, then after that, you're really going to have some big conversations for better or for worse.
Yeah, and that's how this stuff usually shakes out. It's based on playoff results, and usually there's at least 1 or 2 players who become available in talks at that point in the offseason that nobody saw coming. So a lot of it's based on that. We'll see how things shake out. Then we're going to shift gears now to what we learned, presented by Binghamton University. Binghamton University was named the top school in the SUNY system, according to recent rankings from the Wall Street Journal and Forbes. Visit binghamton.edu for more. We learned some stuff about Jalen Brunson's ankle. Knicks coming out and saying that he would be reevaluated in 2 weeks. I think that was late last week, but I had heard that the results that they had to date, which was the MRI, I assume the MRI and the X-ray, it left some people with optimism, kind of breathing a sigh of relief that they had avoided this worst case scenario where it's like a grade 3 severe ankle sprain where he's going to miss months into the playoffs. I think there's a belief and optimism that they've avoided that it's a shorter term thing based on the imaging. Obviously, it depends on how Jalen's ankle responds once he gets back on the practice court. But there was that optimism that, hey, he should be back. We're looking at before the postseason here. We're not looking at the middle of the postseason. So all things considered, to me, the Knicks dodged a bullet there because that injury did not look good. Anthony, I'm just curious, when you're watching the game, what happens when you see something like that? What do you do?
So when I'm watching that game, I remember that play like it was 2 seconds ago. My first thought was as he was driving to the basket, because it was such a tight game, the Knicks were down 2 points. I remember saying, actually, slow it up, bring it back. And like Jalen Brunson does, he went to the basket. That's fine. I'm not even mad at him for it. And then, of course, seeing the replay, I was like, oh, my God. And there's so many times over the last 3 years, Jalen gets hurt. He goes to the locker room and he comes right back. And I'm like, there's no way he's coming back. And then when the Lakers challenged the play, he stayed at the free throw line. I'm like, oh, man, this dude can't even move. And then, of course, the Knicks lose the game. But even if we held on for the victory, I would have lost sleep that night knowing how bad that ankle looked. So hopefully Jalen Brunson will be good to go for the playoffs. But boy, oh boy, that was one scary sprain. But hopefully he's back with a few games left in the regular season because that would be devastating if it was worse. So the Knicks said we'll get an update in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from when they said that would be Friday, March 21st, but who's counting? So that will be a very nervous day for me because, like you said, no Jalen Brunson. I mean, you probably get bounced in the first round with no Jalen Brunson. So hopefully Jalen is good. Hopefully he's ready to play on, March 25th versus the Mavericks. But my guess, and I'm not a doctor, my guess is he'll be back with a few games left in the regular season. That is just a guess, by the way. No, not a report, a guess.
Yeah, I mean, based on what I heard, he should be back certainly before the end of the regular season. Whether, it's a few games, handful of games, we'll see. But again, Knicks dodging a bullet there. And Michael, in your mind, with Jalen, all NBA based on the body of work, assuming he gets to that threshold. I don't know exactly where he is from a games played standpoint. Is he having an all NBA season?
If he gets to the 65 game plateau, I think so. I mean, to me, I felt him and Karl Towns have been all NBA players this year. Now, whether that's, first, second, third team, I don't really, whatever, but hitting the criteria. Yeah. To me, I don't know if this is a hot take, but obviously you don't want Jalen to be hurt, but I think with all the minutes and heavy workload that he plays during the year, going into the playoffs, if he can come back and heal this injury, maybe the rest in an interesting thought gives him a little bit more fresh legs going into the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a bad thought at all.
Be playing guys hard minutes throughout the regular season. We saw last year they were a little burnt out, to be quite honest. So if you're looking for a silver lining and you're a Knicks fan, which I always try to paint both sides of the picture if you can, that has to be the silver lining you're looking at. But yeah, Ian, I certainly think Jalen Brunson, Karl-Anthony Towns have been all NBA performers, and the Knicks have a good enough record to warrant that distinction if you want to look at it from a team perspective as well.
Right. Right. You got Knicks Warriors coming up, fellas, Saturday night. And Draymond Green will be playing. Karl Towns will be playing because despite what Draymond Green said on his podcast, he hasn't been ducking Jimmy Butler, that Karl Towns, that is. And so Draymond Green, what he did is he suggested that Towns was sitting out that Golden State game at the Garden because he didn't want to see Jimmy Butler. We all know that the reason was because he lost a close friend, sadly, to cancer. And condolences to friends and family over there. But he attended the funeral of his close friend, and that's why he missed the game. And I'm disappointed in Draymond, not necessarily because of that. I mean, everybody makes mistakes, but he hasn't come out and corrected his mistake or, apologized for the error. And to me, like, that's what you do when you make a mistake. And, he's talked a lot about the media and look, fairly so. Media deserves criticism, but if you're going to be in that space, I think you have to hold yourself accountable. And I listened to the podcast after that Karl Towns reference, and there was no reference to that. And he was asked about it by Brian Mahoney that night, and talked about, condolences, and he was sorry about the death that Karl Towns was dealing with, and he just talked about kind of around the real issue, which was, an apology and him putting out false information. So anyhow, I'm getting off my soapbox. Draymond Green, fantastic player, all the respect in the world for him as a player, and I enjoy his commentary. But that, I think he missed there, and I do think he's missed on the opportunity to correct the record and to apologize. But yeah, I'm done, guys, on that one. I guess maybe Anthony, did you have any thoughts there when you saw that? I mean, you're in the middle of this. You're paying close attention, I think.
I mean, the first time Draymond said it was like, all right, kind of funny. That's something Draymond would do. But then when Draymond found out why Karl-Anthony Towns missed the game because of a death of a friend that had cancer, the second time Draymond spoke about it, all he had to do was say, hey, I'm sorry, my mistake, sorry to Kat, his girlfriend, and the family. Instead, he took, well, this is what I heard. Kat would have been playing if he didn't have to attend that funeral. So that was pretty awful by Draymond Green, and I believe Kat responded recently. He said he's responding with love, and I don't know. I'm a guy who's filled with love, and I think I have a big heart, but screw love after what he said there. I hope I see Karl Towns go crazy. Dunk on Draymond Green's mug on Saturday night versus the Warriors. I really want to see some fire. Now, I'm not saying he should start a fight with Draymond, but I'd like to see some fire from Kat on Saturday night in Golden State versus the Warriors.
It's going to be a fun one to watch for sure. We talked a lot about the offseason already, but, Mike, I wanted to hit you on Brooklyn, the Nets offseason, big offseason for them. Obviously, their goal was to get a high draft pick. We'll see where they end up in the draft. I think Jordi Fernandez has done a fantastic job. Yeah. What's your read on this? Is it a slow play? I don't think it's a slow play, but I'm just curious about what you've heard in terms of the pace of this rebuild over in Brooklyn.
Well, Ian, what I would tell you for the Brooklyn Nets is originally the plan was to do a slow rebuild for this season and next season, meaning focus on your player development, which in turn is going to lead to probably a high draft pick. Next year, there's 3 guys in the draft that executives look at that could really be a franchise-changing guy. You got Carlos Boozer's kid, you got Darren Peterson, you got AJ DeBanza. I believe I'm pronouncing their names right. If I'm not, forgive me. But those are guys that, to me, are franchise-changing guys potentially. For the Nets, it's one of 2 scenarios, Ian. They have the flexibility that if a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo becomes available and they want to push the chips in the center of the table, they more than can do so. However, originally the plan was always to give it another year. Jordi Fernandez has proven to be a great coach and a culture builder. So you know that you have your coach and kind of your face of the franchise there on that side of things. But big picture, they've got a lot to figure out. Cam Thomas's restricted free agency, he's probably the biggest wild card in free agency because if you ask any executive, scout, anybody, what do they think he can get? The numbers are all over the place. They have Nick Claxton, they have Cam Johnson. These are guys that are trade assets that they could move as well. A lot of dominoes to fall in Brooklyn. I think if they are not going to get a guy like Giannis, then they probably use that cap space, try to get more assets, and whether it's future draft picks and whatnot. The reason I say that is because they could have easily gotten in and potentially won, if they wanted to, the De'Aaron Fox sweepstakes and the Brandon Ingram sweepstakes and paired the both of them, and they did not go that route.
Right.
So they are looking to aim high, whether it is with a star type of player that becomes available that can fit their timeline, or if that doesn't come to fruition, you take another year, you develop, and you get a high draft pick and go from there. They have their own picks now, which they reacquired. So for them, that's kind of the needle moving point. And a lot of that, as we touched on, also for the Knicks as well, it's going to be determined by how the playoffs go, whether it's for Milwaukee, whether it's for Atlanta with Trae Young, et cetera, around the league. And then you got, of course, Kevin Durant with Phoenix, et cetera. There's a bunch of names we can get into, but big picture, it's going to be a fun summer and a transformative one, potentially one way or the other, for the Brooklyn Nets across the bridge.
Yeah, for sure. And Anthony, I know you have to jump, man. So I just want to thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your time at Anthony MSG. Keep an eye out there for Knick fan events at the Garden and outside the Garden, special experiences you can enjoy at those events. So be sure to do that. Anthony, thanks so much, man.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate you guys. Ian, see you soon. Mike, see you soon as well. Mike, we will eventually play one-on-one. We've been talking about this for me and Mike know each other 18 years. I've known you a long time too, Bags, but Mike and I, 18 years we go back.
I'm glad this is on record real quick. I will take all the smoke. You can give me Marlboro, Parliament, Newport, whatever you want. I will take on anybody in the media. You want to play one-on-one, I'm more than down for it. I love playing ball.
All right, well, we're going to get this game. We're going to play this summer. We'll play at a park. It could be in Brooklyn, the Bronx. You want to do mutual and middle and Queens, so it's neutral. That's fine too. I'm ready.
Park, one of the piers. We'll get the wind in my favor.
I'm ready.
Hey, whenever you guys do it, we're just going to do a special edition of the Putback. We'll be filming live. We'll go live from the floor. We'll get people on commentary. So I'm excited for that.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Anthony, thanks, my man. Mike, I'm with you on the Nets. They're in a great spot. They can be aggressive if the situation presents itself. I do think if Sacramento had waited on De'Aaron Fox, I do think the Nets would have been aggressive. If it was something for the offseason, I think the Nets would have certainly had strong interest in Fox, but it didn't go there. They did it at the trade deadline. Nets weren't going to make a trade at the deadline to help themselves win games. But yeah, they're in a very good spot there moving forward. And you mentioned Kevin Durant. My read on it was Dallas was super aggressive even after Durant kind of made it publicly known through back channels that he wasn't interested in getting moved, or particularly to Golden State. I was told Dallas was still looking for ways to get a third team to try to put together a strong offer there to get Kevin Durant. Nico Harrison obviously made a big transaction on the Doncic trade, but he was looking to make another one. Yeah. And I don't know how the Kyrie injury impacts those plans, if they do at all, if it does at all. But if they're still thinking that way, I think they will be aggressive again on Durant. What's your read there early, Suns, KD? How do you think it shakes out?
Well, first of all, Ian, I mean, the Kyrie Irving trade, brutal. Because now when you're looking at the recovery line, who knows if or when he can come back next year. It has to shape the way that they view things going forward. And also for the financial future for him, looking ahead towards whether he was going to get extended or not. You got to look at Anthony Davis down the line as well. A lot up in the air for Dallas. But to answer your question about Kevin Durant and the Phoenix Suns, look, certainly he's going to get linked to the Houston Rockets. Ime Udoka, when he was with the Boston Celtics, pushed for the Celtics at the time to try to get Kevin Durant. That's when they had the talks with Jalen Brown and a first-round pick with the Nets. Obviously, both teams pivoted in a different direction. But really, Minnesota also, I get wanting to pair him with Anthony Edwards, but how they would go about doing that and how it would be a fit for Phoenix would remain to be seen. KD still is playing at a high level, but any team that's going to be looking to acquire him, I would venture to say, is going to want him behind the scenes to be open to a contract extension. You're not going to give up a ton of assets for a 1-year rental generally in the NBA. So wherever he's going, it's similar almost in a way to the Jimmy Butler situation, where you're essentially trading not only for the player, but you're also in the back of your mind having the max contract extension conversation as well, almost simultaneously. Wink, wink on that one.
He does have power in this situation because of that contract and where he is with it. And I think, again, a lot of things depend on what happens in the postseason. And you mentioned Kyrie's injury, and I don't know what the timeline is. It's awful for him the way he was playing, but if they think he could get back and be 100% healthy, early on next season, I just wonder if Dallas ends up kind of going there again and seeing what Phoenix is looking for. Topics really for another day. Now we want to bring in my friend and yours, Matthew Spenley, the Big Spend, for our talkback session. Matt has some questions from the listeners and the viewers. Matt, what's going on?
What's up, guys? I kind of view myself as your PJ Tucker, Ian. I feel like that's kind of my role. That's what I come here to do. I'm on the bench. I'm cheering you guys on, and then I come in at the end, garbage time, just clean things up, hype you guys up. That's my role here.
I like it. You do it well.
Thanks, man. On the PJ Tucker stuff, though, Ian, because you're not one to take credit for it. I did want to give you credit because on the show, he was the guy that you consistently brought up to keep an eye on with the 15th man. So had to give you your flowers a little bit as your main hype man. Had to do it.
I appreciate it, Matt Tucker. Thank you.
Got you. All right. One thing I know we kind of skipped over earlier that's a big topic of discussion in the comments today, and then just generally is, Mitchell Robinson's return. Obviously, we spent a ton of time talking about him returning to the floor, being back with the Knicks. He's been back, limited minutes, but I think he looks like Mitch to me. Looks healthy. He's been running, contesting shots, obviously kind of changing the floor up. So, Mike, I want to start with you and then just go to Ian. What you guys have seen from Mitch, and then maybe a little more specifically, too, about him and Cat together.
Sure. Short and sweet on Mitch. I mean, active rim roller, which is what they've been lacking a little bit at times. An interior presence for them, both rebounding the ball and as a shot blocker to alter shots, even if he's not blocking shots. He's been everything defensively that they've needed. In terms of pairing him with Cat, Cat, I know he prefers to play the 4 at times, no question, but offensively, their floor spacing is better and the driving lanes are more open when Cat is at the 5 and they're playing 5 out. I just think in the playoffs, it gives Tom Thibodeau more optionality, which they're going to need if they want to try to go up against Boston and Cleveland. But Ian touched on it earlier. When Mitchell Robinson and OG and Anunoby are on the floor together, they're one of the top defensive teams. Offensively, you're going to take a little bit of a hit, but you can always go to the 5 out, have Josh Hart, Mikal, OG, Jalen, and Karl Towns. And if you need a little bit of a spark offensively and you're down or you're just trying to blow a game open.
Yeah, I think Michael hit what I was going to say about Mitchell Robinson and Karl-Anthony Towns. But in terms of how he's looked, to me, this, Mitchell Robinson has come back from injuries in the past. And there was one year where he didn't have the opportunity to do a ton of conditioning. And he came back and he really needed some time to get his conditioning back and to get into top shape. But to me, this year, he looks significantly lighter. He's moving really well. So that's what I look at early on. Is he hesitant at all? He hasn't been hesitant. He's been physical without a second thought. And that's kind of what you look at here for me with Robinson. Now, the timing is going to continue to improve. The endurance is going to continue to improve. But 4 steals last night against Sacramento. So he's disrupting things even as he's getting his timing back. So if he can stay healthy and continue to progress, it just gives you an added element, an element that the Knicks on the defensive end have been missing for much of the year.
And still lots of runway before the playoffs too. So, he can continue getting his feet under. And one last point I just wanted to say, not exactly a question, more a point kind of based on the wing conversation you guys are having too. I feel like Anunoby's kind of been the main guy that's changed his game a little bit more. I think some of those possessions since Brunson's gone down, he's obviously not the most, decorated isolation scorer, but they've clearly given him some of those possessions. And Ian, you mentioned Mikal against Sacramento too. Getting to the free throw line at the frequency they did. I also thought last night, he had a couple drives that he welcomed contact. And that's something that has been a big discussion all year, that he's oftentimes shied away from it. And he had a couple drives where he finished and then one where he had a dunk. So, you kind of hope that that's something that can port over once Brunson's back. But just a couple of observations from the bench as you guys were chatting. So that's what I got, Ian. That's what I got.
Thank
Michael.
you, Mr. Spenley. I think both OG and Bridges, maybe they had 8 assists each, or it was close to that.
Well, like 8 and
was
7.
really moving well against Sacramento. Mr. Scotto, what's the biggest kind of swing what are you looking at in the East with respect to the Knicks the rest of this regular season? What should we be watching out for?
I mean, they got to stay healthy. Like OG, I touched on it earlier. He's been an X factor for them, worth every penny. I know that raised a lot of eyebrows, especially when he was making more than Jalen Brunson. But
significantly more, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, hey, big picture, the free market dictated that, and Philadelphia, it would have been an interesting conversation if they got him instead of Paul George. That's a different conversation for another day as well. But a fun what if.
Yes.
For the Knicks. Continuing to see Mitchell Robinson's progression coming back, and eventually and I think the answer is probably no, and I'm sure you would agree, but is Tom Thibodeau ever going to lengthen the rotation just a little bit to save these guys for the playoffs? I've seen no evidence of that for the past few years. And Tibbs, if you ever wanted to squeeze an orange and have no pulp, like Tom Thibodeau would be the guy. He squeezes the most out of every regular season, all out for sure. So, look, I think the Knicks have definitely a puncher's chance. I think obviously Boston and Cleveland have been the top tier of the East, but the Knicks, you can't ever discount Jalen Brunson. He's one of the most clutch players. And Karl Towns is that kind of 1A, 1B to Jalen where they have a shot offensively every night. So just looking for continued health and to see who can kind of continue to step up the way Deuce McBride has a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great point regarding health. They're in good shape now. Obviously, they want to remain that way going into mid-April. That will do it for us today on the Putback. Mr. Michael Scotto, thank you so much for joining us. You can see his work over at Hoops Hype, Senior NBA Insider, and at Michael Scotto on Twitter.
Mike Scotto. Mike A. Scotto. I feel bad for the New York one. Mike A. Scotto, SCOTTO.
At Mike A. Scotto on Twitter. Mike, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it, man. And we will be back next week, Tuesday, March 18th, with another episode of the Putback. Thanks for joining us today, and we hope to see you back then.